Hey everybody, welcome. I'm here with Euwyn, the founder of Publishing Map. He is an independent author and he recognized a need and he made it. Euwyn, hi.
Hey Colin, thanks for the intro. But yes, cool. I did launch Publishing Map. It's just as I mentioned it, we're about to launch to the public. I think either today, tomorrow. Super happy to have this chat, and yeah, I've been very excited about it. A lot of work has gone into it, and I'm excited to get it onto the road.
Well, you reached out to me on email a few days ago, and I get so many, I'll be honest, I get so many emails. I usually just scan them like, okay, next. But this one, I was like, wait a minute, this is truly valuable tool that needs to exist. So why don't you start telling us just briefly what is Publishing Map and why you created it?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Cool. So Publishing Map is essentially a map of the whole publishing process. That's it. It's in the name, right? And so um, how this began was with my own experience publishing my book. And just for context, for everyone, I self-published a piece of philosophical fiction. So it's kind of narrative-driven philosophy. Um, I published it via KDP, but not before I navigated all the other possible routes. But that's me narrating from the end. From the beginning, what I had done was I had written 100K words. I had haggled together some beta readers to take a look at my work. At the end of the day, I was told by different people that I had to pay for an editor, and then I thought about doing that, and I did do that. And then some people said I should publish, and so I started looking into that. And then some people said I should self-publish, and then I started looking into that. And then at the end of the day, I felt like I was nowhere because I didn't know what I should be doing. And every time I searched on the web, I found something that was I never really found like a source of truth that I felt was agnostic and from an agnostic source that actually just cared about the writer and wasn't trying to sell something to the writer, right? And so hence the definitive publishing map. Like if you go to publishingnmap.com, what I'm really trying to do is like settle the score once and for all, and like instead of you having to figure out like your answers or your pathways from fragmented sources, you get like an agnostic like map that has no interest in selling anything to you, and it's just all about detailing the steps and the possibilities that what's the advantages and disadvantages about each one, right? So yeah, so all of that was like born from my own experience with publishing. And so the whole job was turning fragmented information into like unified information. And I just wanted, yeah, to display a route that writers could go in, figure out what step is right for them, which one they could, what options are open to them, because sometimes that's not mentioned to the writer, right? That there are different options that you could consider. And yeah, that's the goal for now.
Well, I think it's really amazing. I invite viewers, listeners, as we're talking here, go to publishingnmap.com and check it out as we talk about it. I have a lot of questions about the different areas of the website. So first of all, you talked about it's neutral. Why is that so important?
Yes. So just like I said, I found resources around the web. I found like answers around Reddit, but when I looked into them, they usually came from a website that had something to sell, right? So now it's needless to say there's a lot of contention around certain parts of the publishing world, right? Like let's say certain uh sure, a lot of typically people think it's just traditional publishers and self-published. There's only two options. There's actually way more than that, right? And it is very easy to, for example, end up in what you call a hybrid publisher, where they end up trying to charge you a lot of money to publish something. And there's a lot of them that are legit, right? They actually help you publish, but there's also a lot of them that are quite sharkish. Like I've personally met lots of writers, and I've spoken to such publishers, for example, where they say, okay, you get to publish for like let's say 4 grand, right? We'll handle everything for you. But then once you pay the money, you ask for an edit, they'll say, cool, it's $800 more to get an edit. And then you ask for something else, like, hey, I want to get my book typeset to like this sort of level, like following this reference. They're like, cool, it's $1,000 more. And sooner, or later, you find out that you're paying way more than you ever bargained, right? And so it's small things like these where like you're like, okay, I want something I want to figure out the source of truth from something that doesn't have an interest. in selling something to me, right? And so I as a writer felt I wished that something like that existed, and so I'm like, cool, maybe I should just try and build it myself because I couldn't find anything like that. Now, there are a lot of resources out there that are quite agnostic, but they are all hidden in blogs. So they're still like, let's say Kevin Kelly, founder of Wired, right? I think he wrote like a great piece on everything I know about self-publishing. There's like different writers here and there who wrote all about the process, but they seem to be like opinionated takes rather than anything too definitive. So what I did essentially was like, number one, I'm going to set up Publishing Map and not accept any payment. I already had some requests actually when I reached out to the sources that shall remain unnamed. They were like, cool, we actually have an affiliate program where we will pay you if you sort of, mention so and so, or if you get drive views to our site. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that because that's kind of what I didn't want that dynamic as a writer, right? So yeah, number one, like I didn't want to accept any sort of payment, so it's completely agnostic. Number two, I just wanted a place where I could view everything in one place that wasn't someone's blog, because sometimes if it's just a person's experience, you don't know what they might have missed out. And so at number three, and the final point is what I ended up doing is synthesizing all of that, right? So from like blogs and different opinions to like just factual pieces on like what publishing entails, whether it's written by like a company or another company or someone who's helping in the process or an expert in some kind of part of the publishing flow or anything like that. Just kind of synthesize everything, verify the facts with the sources, and then at the end of the day, produce a map where hopefully writers can go and just get the information they need. That's it.
Well, I can speak from experience because I went through this dating all the way back to 2010 when I wrote my first novel. My first publishing contract was with a vanity press. They charged me what you said, $4,000. They gave me basically nothing in return.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it's been me trying to navigate the publishing process. And now I try to share that wisdom with others. But like you also pointed out, I do a lot of that on my blog. And even if I don't charge for my blog, I am trying to get traffic to the blog. So I love that it is agnostic, that it is neutral, that it is cited and sourced. And it's also just laid out in a very logical format from beginning to end chronologically. These are the steps. I saw you have 5 routes to publication, and all of those can be then narrow, subheadings under those. You have 12 stages, which I think is really valuable just to see from beginning to end what each of the stages are. And you have ways for writers to click on, okay, I want to do traditional publishing and I want to take this long. Like you show how long each part of the process is. You have ways to combine different parts to see how much it costs and how long it takes. And it's like so much useful information to break it all down to a manageable way that works for every writer at any stage in the process. Can you just talk
Mhm.
a little bit more about the usefulness and how it's laid out?
For sure. And that sounds like a great point to share my screen. So I might just do that. Colin, can you confirm if that's visible? Okay, awesome. But yes, so you're looking at publishing map. There are two parts to publishing map. There's a guided flow and there's a reference flow. So guided flow is what Colin just mentioned, right? Where you just look at the masthead, I suppose, at the top, where like there are four needs, I suppose, that any writer needs to sort of care about, right? Number one, what are the options available to you, agnostically, once again? Number two, were you to choose one of those options, what do you have to do in sequential order from step one to the final step, right? The third need is like, what's the cost of that option and how much time does it take? And the fourth one is just like check the offer, like what I said earlier. Like if you said if you worked with like a hybrid press or you weren't sure about them, or vanity pressed, or like you spoke to an agent and you weren't sure about the offer, then there should be a way to check, right? So there are actually checklists out there that we've kind of borrowed from and we referenced as well. So it's all here. If you check the reference, it's just the blog version of that. So instead of going through a guided flow, if you like to read full walls of text, there's everything down here as well. So these two are kind of different ways to present the same information. But okay, so I'll run through what's in here. So as I mentioned earlier, I feel like most advice, just to put it bluntly and succinctly, is like most publishing advice starts one step too late, I think. Like they start when you're already in the universe of traditional publishing, right? This is what you should do. Or like when you're already in the universe of self-publishing, this is what you should do, right? But no, if you abstract one level up, there are actually lots of options available to you, and there are 5 routes broadly, right? So you can either choose to publish traditionally, or you can self-publish, obviously. But there are actually more options available to you. There are independent and small presses, right? There are hybrid presses, or sometimes there, I don't know, vanity presses might be some sort of an offshoot or a synonym there. And then there are specialized or institutional presses as well that you could publish with. So in many cases, actually, independent and small presses could be a primary route. So that's one thing that I like to mention to writers as well. Like, let's say you write something niche, or like you write something literary that's kind of out of the norm, right? Not the typical things that traditional publishers like to publish. That might actually be a natural fit. So that's already one, like, I think, epiphany that I got, at least off the back of doing all this research myself before I built this. But then once you click on each one, once you've committed to a certain step, right, or at least once you're exploring a certain route, there are broadly 12 stages, which all of them pass through, just with different levels of who's controlling what and who's paying for what, and so on, right? So you can find it out easily by just clicking through each one of them. So let's start maybe with independent and small presses, like I said, right? Once you click find my next stage, you can actually see there, 12 stages here, right? From writing, that's the first step. Obviously, the second step is getting critique or feedback on your text. That's usually the beta reader sort of stage. The third one is getting an edit. So this is where people talk about developmental editors, like copy editors, proofreaders, and so on, right? And then there's the third stage that covers cover design, formatting, or typesetting, as it's also known. And then there's rights and metadata. And then there's the fourth step, which includes producing the book, distribution, and audiobooks as well. It is now a pretty trendy way to go about distribution. And then the final step is launching, marketing, and building a long tail audience. So no matter which route you choose, like these 12 stages still apply. But let's say with traditional publishing, right, you're still writing, but editing is usually handled by the institution, right? But let's say if you're self-publishing, you have to do that yourself. And earlier, as we mentioned, like with vanity presses, sometimes with editing, you don't know whether they're charging for it or not. So it makes sense to clarify up front. This also goes to say, I think just there's like one extra piece of information. I think people tend to group up editing as one big step. It's actually not. You can break it down to many different like small steps, or it's a sequence of steps, right? You start with critique to developmental editing to line and copy editing and then proofreading, and they all sort of solve different problems. So yes, broadly 5 routes for publishing, and then 12 stages. The choice of route, it's up to you, but there are different implications for like who pays, who controls the result, how long it takes. But at the end of the day, this is, I'd say, an sort of operating model decision, not like it shouldn't be like a status decision or like a forced into decision, obviously. But yes, I think that's a quick primer to everything that's down here.
Yeah, I would definitely invite writers to go check it out and look through it. It's so helpful, like you said, to have that knowledge up front rather than you're already started down the path and you don't quite understand what that path is. I guess the last thing I'll ask is you say on the site that this is meant to be forwarded. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, my goal at the end of the day is just to help writers, right? And I realized that in order to help writers have to know that such a resource exists. So the first step I've done here is like I've compiled everything together. I've sort of scraped the entire internet, found like trusted resources, and like put them together. And just for context, right? It's not on the guided piece because it's a bit of a mess. But if you go to the reference piece, right, um, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll actually find all the sources that I've cited. So go deeper, you can see there's Kevin Kelly, there's Jane Friedman, there's Reedsy, which is marketplace, there's IBPA, there's like all sorts of sources that I've sort of uh, took this together from, and they're all carefully cited throughout the text. And yeah, so like essentially that all that work has been done. I've also verified the facts with the sources, so we know that actually it's also made clear which ones have been verified with the source and which ones have not been verified. Sometimes they don't reply, so you know exactly which one is the latest verified information, right? And so yes, like right now I'm just focused on like Colin, it's a pleasure to talk to you and get introduced to your community. And I'm sort of also trying to speak to a couple more community leaders and like see like, hey, how do we help the writers in your community know what's up? Because at the end of the day, I just care about helping writers write. I'd say like I just wrote my own book, and like I felt like it was such a maze, and I'd like to be able to help the second, third, fourth, and if it's a couple dozen and a couple hundred, I'd be very happy. But yes, the corrections, everything, corrections on the site, change log, everything remains open. None of this is an endorsement. I should also be direct that I created and maintained the publishing map at Wordsmith. And so all of that is attributable down here. That's sort of an editorial type company I co-founded, but that relationship is sort of visible and disclosed. But the map itself is like a free, untethered resource. No sign up, no payment, and routes like there are routes that involve like uh, all companies and all the options, and it's never privileging one over the other.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I'll be forwarding it to all kinds of people. First and foremost, my dad who wrote a book, and he's got all kinds of questions. I'm like, okay, Dad, just go here, please, and look all at this information. How did your
Appreciate
how did your book end up doing?
it's going. I would say okay. So I started with long story short. I started exploring traditional publishing, and so I spoke to lots of agents out there, and then I realized at some point in time, look, this is sort of for a different discussion, right? I realized at some point in time, like traditional publishers optimize for, let's say, you having 50K followers, a PhD, or having a big name, right? I had none of those, and I'm like a first time author. I've come from the tech world, and like I've always been like into philosophy, and I think I have I think I have a story that I wanted to tell. And so traditional publishers were sort of a no go. I spoke to a few agents. They were like, it's a bit, it's kind of the work I wrote kind of didn't really fit into any one genre as well. So it made it a bit hard to sell. And so then I explored I explored indie presses first. There are a couple where like they publish works like mine, but then some yeses, some no's, some I wasn't too sure about them. I wasn't sure about reputation. I wasn't sure about what kind of press they were. And at the end of the day, I got also one yes from a hybrid publisher that was quite sizable and quite well known. But then they were charging me, I think, 2 or 3 grand for the book. And then I was like, should I take it? Should I not? But after like doing a lot of my own research, once again going to Reddit's forums and all sort of materials, I've decided not to for a variety of reasons, but also mainly I think because I wanted to retain creative control. Like I didn't want to be boxed into any one genre. I didn't want to have to rewrite my book into something recognizable. I liked the fact that it was strange and like narrative philosophical fiction, like sits nowhere. And so yeah, look, I got it out. I can be fully transparent and say I've only got a couple dozen sales so far, but I'm perfectly happy with it. I think the goal was just to get like something I feel like is my own out there. And for now, like yeah, I'll just keep building tools for writers. I'm like helping other writers write. I might write a second book, a third book. At this point, I care more about like just the whole process and helping people get ideas out there than trying to build something that ends up being sold by Barnes and Noble, for example.
Well, congratulations on the book, but more importantly, on recognizing a need and fulfilling it. And like I said, I'll be forwarding it. I think you can set your expectations a little higher than a few hundred, and there'll be an audience for it for sure. I'll do what I can to get it out there, but I think people will grab onto it and share it, and it'll just kind of grow from there.
Cool. Yeah. Hey, actually, Colin, if I can ask you one question as well.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious. We can close it out here, right? Because you've sat on as like sides of the table that I have not been on, and you've actually sat, if I can think of it right now, on nearly every side of the system. In fact, right? You've played author, editor, press as well,
Hybrid,
publisher.
traditional,
Yeah,
independent.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So actually, if like I can ask like a pointed question, like which handoff do writers most often underestimate, perhaps?
Well, I think they underestimate just how intricate and long and complicated the process is. Uh, they don't understand how many people are involved. I mean, you mentioned designers and typesetters, and then there's the marketing and there's the editing. And if you do it independently, you wear many hats and you end up doing a lot of that yourself. But as a publisher myself, I work with a dozen or so people on any one title to get it all the way through to publication. And you have to understand that everyone's on different schedules and everyone provides different talents and skills to the process. I just wrote a blog post about audiobook production and how complicated that can get. You can't just have a passion and an idea and get it out there. You have to respect the process, and the only way to respect the process is to understand the process, and you can't understand the process until you can see it. And I think that's what your platform does, is it allows authors to take a step back and be able to see just how complicated and intricate it is, while also demystifying it so that you can actually learn it, excuse me, without going to Reddit and without going to forums and getting all kinds of different information from people that are biased and things like that. So, yeah, just having a broad understanding of how much is involved and being ready for that so that you're not disappointed when you put your book out there, aren't getting the response that you wanted.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Well, I guess it also makes a ton of sense why we got connected and why we're having this chat. But yeah,
Yeah.
look, I think just my final words, I suppose, like, yeah, use the map. I built it to be used. If it saves an explanation, and just send like a link. Like, you can send various links on pathways on publishingnmap.com, whether to a writer who's asking or to someone else where you feel like you need to explain a certain decision or like what something entails. If anything is wrong with the website, send me the line and the better source, and I'll correct it immediately. And yeah, happy publishing to everyone. And Colin, looking forward to see all the books you publish and all the future books that you write yourself.
Thanks, Ewan. It's been a real pleasure. I'm so glad that we found each other.
Thank you. Likewise.